What's going on, guys? Welcome to your 5th Unity tutorial, and in this tutorial we are going to get into some scripting or some coding, programming, whatever lingo you want to use. That's what we're going to do, because obviously within a game you want to have some interaction. You want, our ball not just to drop like this. That's not much of a game. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a script for our player or for our sphere that we set up that's going to move it to the right at a consistent velocity. So the things that we have to take into consideration is the right direction would be our x-axis. To the right will be a positive x velocity. To the left will be a negative x velocity. So we're just going to jump right into it. Again, if you guys are new programmers, hopefully you'll kind of understand the concepts. But if you don't, go on to mybringback.com. We have a lot of free tutorials for learning Java programming. And they'll be beneficial to you, even though we're going to be programming in a different language called JavaScript. It's pretty similar, and you'll get the basic concepts. But I have a feeling you guys probably won't even need to do that, because we're going to just write some simple programs in this tutorial. But if you ever get confused, check out our other tutorials on our website. But let's jump into it. The first thing that we want to do is create a script. So we're just going to create our player and, work on that for now. Add some functionality to our ball besides just gravity. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the project tab here, right click on our scripts, go to create, and we're going to say create a new JavaScript. Now this script is going to be specifically designed for a player object or a sphere. So we're going to label it as player. So it's nice to have that organization going. So just off click, and in our inspector we see some basic setup over here. We're actually going to open up Mono Developer. How you do that is just double click on your script itself, or in your inspector you can hit the open button. So I'm just going to double click. Might take a few seconds for you guys, and it will open up this IDE or our development platform that we are going to start coding in. As you can see, there's already two methods set up within this script, and these two functions are functions that Unity calls when we hit the run button or when we actually run our game. Now the start would be the first method that's called. It's only called once, so we might want to set up some initialization variables. We might want to set up some basic functions of our player within the start method. So that's what the start method will do. The update method is going to be called over and over and over and over. We're just going to make different adjustments throughout the update method because it's within our game loop or game thread. So it's just going to keep consistently calling this update method, and any changes to our player will be executed throughout this method. Now we can also create different functions or different methods. Both mean the exact same thing. So for example, we're eventually going to create a jump method, and it's a basic setup like that. Now Unity is not going to call this jump method because Unity didn't develop this method. This is a method we came up with, and obviously it does nothing right now. So before we actually get into the coding, I'm going to go back to Unity, click on our player object, and over here we added the component rigid body. Now we have these things like mass, drag, angular drag, uses gravity, kinetic energy, all this stuff. But we are not limited just to these aspects that we see in the GUI or the graphic user interface for Unity. We also have all of these other aspects attached to our player just by adding this rigid body component. The thing I want to emphasize is we are making this script specifically for a player object. So we can relate to the player object that we are creating the script for, and we know that's a rigid body. So we can access some additional information besides just the stuff that we do in the GUI over here. So we're just going to jump back into Mono Develop and go into our start method, and we're going to define the starting velocity of our ball. Again, we want the ball to move to the right, so that is the x-axis, and we're going to define the x velocity of our ball. And how we do that is we refer to the rigid body, and this help menu should come up, but if it doesn't, you can hit Control Space and it will pop up this help menu for you. And then just hit down, and we're going to go to this rigid body here, enter, Now what this does is it accesses all of the information that a rigid body type object has. We're going to get a little bit more specific, so we do that by hitting a period, and we have these other things like add force, add torque, but again we're working with velocity, so we're just going to say we want to access the velocity. So again, all lowercase, type out velocity or use your helper, and then we want to get even more specific because we can have the overall velocity of the object, or we can have the velocity in the x and the y or the z direction. So we're going to hit our period again and hit x direction, and now we're going to set this velocity to be something like 15. Now the unit size, you guys might be like, okay, what does 15 mean? Is that 15 miles per hour, 15 meters per hour? What does it mean? It's just a unit that Unity uses. Don't worry about it for now. We're just going to set it at 15. We'll get into the specifics later. But now let's save this script and go back into Unity and hit run. Pretty boring, right? Well, the thing that happened is we haven't attached our script to our actual player object yet. So we're going to go back and stop our game from running. And then what we're going to do is click on our player object. And we're going to drag this script over to our player object within the inspector, just like we did with rigid body before. So we drag that over. Now let's run it again, see what happens. As you can see, our ball has a nice velocity. Let's expand our platform. Sorry, I'm trying to make this look somewhat decent, and scroll out. So since this is the introduction to scripting, we're going to get a little bit more specific. Let's say we want to shoot off our ball and then we want to have it change direction. So we want to change the velocity over time to the negative. Okay, so what I mean by that is, again, we have this start method. It's going to shoot our ball off to the right, and then we have this update method that gets called over and over and over again. So again, we can refer to the rigid body of the object that this script is designed for. So again, it's our player object, and then we can say velocity dot x, and we could set it to be like negative 15, something like that. But what's going to happen is our start method is going to get called. It's going to shoot our ball off to the right for like a millisecond, and then it's going to call this update method, and then it's going to be like, the velocity is supposed to be in the negative direction, so it's going to shoot our ball off to the left. That's not exactly what we want. We want kind of a smooth transaction. So what we want to do is we want to make small increments to the velocity in the x direction over time. How we do that is a simple minus sign before our equal sign here, and let's just change this to be like 0.01. That's probably too small. We'll just do 0.1 for now. We're going to save this, and what this is doing is it's saying, hey, whatever the current velocity is, subtract 0.1 from that each time we call this update method. Again, our update method gets called over and over and over again, so it's eventually going to be in the negative direction. The first time this update method gets called is going to be 15, and then we're going to subtract 0.1 from 15, and that's what the velocity is going to be equal to now. So it's going to be 14.9. Next time it calls this, it's going to be 14.8. And then eventually we're going to get in the negative direction. So let's just run this application, and as you can see here, it kind of slows down, then it starts going back in the negative direction. So that's the benefit of the update method, because we have access, and the ball will be looks like it's getting faster and faster. We have access to consistently updating whatever we want within that update method. That's why it's called update. So that's pretty cool. Let's say we want to have the ball stop once it gets to a velocity of 0. We're just going to create a simple if statement, and if you guys have programmed before, you probably know what this is, but just for example's sake, again, since we're just getting into the programming aspect, I'm going to say rigid body dot velocity dot x if that is greater than 0. And then we're going to end our parentheses, add another bracket, finish off a bracket here, and we're going to subtract 0.1 from the velocity. Only if the velocity is positive, so only if the velocity is going to the right. And we can also throw in an else clause, else, and we're going to add a bracket here. We're going to set up our rigid body to, or the velocity of the x direction, I should say, to be just 0. Most likely this else statement won't be called, but just in case if we subtracted a little bit too much within this statement, it's going to, reset the velocity to be 0. Oops, I added an extra bracket there. So let's save this, run it, and I'm sorry for that noise in the background, but as you can see here, a ball shoots off to the right and just comes to a stop. So that's the introduction of scripting. We'll get into some more complex stuff as we go, but thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next tutorial.